The ballroom shimmered with gold light and quiet arrogance. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen raindrops above a sea of tailored suits and designer dresses. It was one of those exclusive corporate galas where every smile was calculated and every handshake hit a motive. At the center of it all stood Charles Whitmore, a smug, silver-haired millionaire whose laughter often filled rooms before his reputation did. Tonight, his company was announcing a new international partnership with a major Chinese conglomerate. The stakes were high, the cameras were rolling, and reputations were on the line. To Whitmore, it was another opportunity to flaunt his wealth, power, and carefully crafted image of superiority. Near the back of the room stood Angela Reed, a quiet, dignified black woman who had worked for Whitmore's corporation for almost a decade. Her job title sounded fancy, operations coordinator, but in truth, she was often treated like invisible background noise. She'd worked twice as hard for half the credit, but tonight she was only there to support her team. Beside her stood her 10-year-old daughter, Maya, dressed neatly in a simple blue dress. It was bring your family night, though few executives actually did. When the Chinese delegation arrived, something unexpected happened. The translator Whitmore had hired didn't show up. Panic rippled through the staff. Without an interpreter, the deal could collapse. Whitmore's jaw tightened as he scanned the room, desperate for a solution. Then his eyes landed on Angela, and his smirk returned. "Unless someone here speaks Mandarin," he said loudly, drawing amused glances from the crowd. "This entire event is about to be a very expensive waste of time." He paused, eyeing Angela with mock sympathy. "Tell you what," he chuckled cruelly, "if your daughter can translate for us, I'll give you my job." The room erupted in laughter. Phones came out to record the humiliation. Angela froze, her stomach twisting in shame and rage. But Maya didn't flinch. She calmly stepped forward, her small voice slicing through the laughter. And when she opened her mouth, what came out silenced the entire room. For a few moments, the room stood still, a breathtaking silence where disbelief hung thick in the air. What they had just heard didn't fit the image they had formed. A small black girl, no older than 10, had just spoken fluent Mandarin, clear, confident, and composed, as if she'd been doing it her entire life. The executives from the Chinese delegation straightened, exchanging surprised glances before breaking into approving smiles. Charles Whitmore's grin faltered. The arrogance that had painted his face moments earlier began to fade, replaced by a creeping confusion. But before anyone could question it, Maya politely bowed and began translating the guests' introductions with effortless fluency. Her voice carried the perfect balance of tone and inflection, mirroring the nuances of native speakers. The entire ballroom shifted its energy. The laughter stopped, the mockery died, and eyes that once dismissed her now followed her every move. Cameras that had been raised to capture her humiliation were now recording something entirely different, something extraordinary. Angela watched from the back, her hands trembling. A storm of emotions churned inside her. Pride, fear, disbelief. She had always known Maya was special, gifted beyond her years, but she never imagined this gift would unfold under such cruel circumstances. Maya had always been drawn to languages. At 6, she was already reading books far beyond her grade level. When Angela started working extra hours at Whitmore Industries to make ends meet, Maya would spend her evenings in the public library, where an elderly Chinese librarian named Mrs. Lee took notice of her curiosity. Over the years, Mrs. Lee had taught her Mandarin, not as a chore, but as an exchange of stories, a bridge between cultures. By the age of 10, Maya wasn't just fluent. She could interpret idioms, emotions, and subtle cultural cues that most adults missed. Angela had encouraged her quietly, but never boasted about it. She knew too well how the world treated brilliance that came from unexpected places, especially when it came in the form of a little black girl. Back in the ballroom, as Maya continued translating, the crowd shifted from amusement to awe. Executives whispered among themselves, taking notes, asking questions, impressed by the seamless communication she facilitated. Even the Chinese delegation, initially skeptical about the event's professionalism, seemed impressed. But the one person who couldn't stand what was unfolding was Charles Whitmore. For years, His power had thrived on appearances, on maintaining control, hierarchy, and image. Watching a 10-year-old, whom he had tried to use for mockery, now command the respect of foreign investors, made something dark twist inside him. His pride burned. When the speeches ended, polite applause filled the air. Whitmore forced a smile for the cameras, his jaw tense. "Thank you, everyone," he said, his voice brittle. What an unexpected display. His words dripped with insincerity. But the Chinese guests were delighted, thanking Maya and shaking Angela's hand. They complimented her daughter's intelligence and said this partnership felt even more promising because of it. For a brief moment, Angela and Maya were seen, really seen, in a space that had always treated them as invisible. That night, as the event concluded, several executives approached Angela privately. They spoke in hushed tones about Maya's talent, about education, about opportunity. Some seemed genuinely impressed. Others seemed opportunistic, already calculating how to use this moment to their advantage. Whitmore, meanwhile, stayed silent, nursing his humiliation behind fake smiles. He congratulated the delegation, nodded at the cameras, and pretended it was all part of his plan. But when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, his expression changed. The charming executive facade fell away, replaced by quiet fury. He didn't like being upstaged, especially not by them. Angela sensed it, the way his eyes lingered too long, the tightness of his voice as he said, "Good job tonight." She knew that tone. It wasn't praise. It was warning. As she left the building with Maya's small hand in hers, she couldn't shake the unease crawling through her chest. She knew Whitmore too well. He wasn't the type to forget being embarrassed, especially not in public. And though Maya had only wanted to help, Angela feared this night had just made her daughter a target in a world where talent wasn't always celebrated, especially when it came from the wrong color. The next morning, the video from the gala exploded across social media. Someone had uploaded it under the title "Little Black Girl Shocks Millionaire" by speaking fluent Chinese. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. People across the country marveled at Maya's calm intelligence and the poetic justice of the moment. But inside Whitmore Industries, the mood was far from celebratory. Angela arrived at work early, as she always did, her nerves humming beneath her calm exterior. The whispers began the moment she stepped into the lobby. Co-workers glanced up from their desks, pretending to be busy when she passed. Some smiled awkwardly, others avoided eye contact altogether. The overnight fame had changed everything, and nothing. When she reached her office, a terse email from Human Resources awaited her. Report to Mr. Whitmore's office at 9 a.m. regarding last night's event. Her stomach tightened. She knew what that meant. Whitmore's office sat at the top of the building. Glass walls, panoramic view, and an ego big enough to fill every inch of space. When Angela entered, he was already standing by the window, his back turned, hands clasped behind him like a general about to deliver bad news to a soldier. He didn't look at her right away. "You caused quite the spectacle last night," he said finally, his voice clipped and cold. "Congratulations, you've made us go viral. Unfortunately, not for the reasons I prefer." Angela stayed quiet. She had learned long ago that words rarely change men like him. He turned, his expression somewhere between irritation and forced civility. "Now, I'm sure you didn't mean to embarrass me in front of international partners," he continued. "But the optics, well, you can imagine how that looks. A child taking the spotlight during a multi-million-dollar deal? Not exactly the professional image I'm cultivating." Angela felt the sting beneath his tone. He wasn't angry about professionalism. He was angry about power, that his authority had been shaken by someone he considered beneath him. "I'll be handling communications from now on," he said sharply. "And I'd appreciate it if you kept your daughter's extracurricular talents out of corporate events." Then came the part that twisted her insides. He smiled. "Of course, no hard feelings. I value loyalty, Angela. You've been with us for years. But remember, loyalty goes both ways." Angela understood the threat buried in his words. For the next several weeks, the atmosphere grew toxic. Her workload increased mysteriously. Small mistakes, things she had never been blamed for before, were now suddenly her fault. Meetings she once attended were held without her. Her name was quietly removed from internal memos and team acknowledgments. Meanwhile, Maya's life had taken an opposite turn. Reporters and educators reached out to the family, eager to meet the girl genius. Local news stations wanted interviews. Scholarship programs wanted to sponsor her education. But Angela, ever cautious, declined them all. She knew how fast attention could turn cruel, especially in a world eager to celebrate a prodigy, but reluctant to protect her. Still, Maya noticed a change at home. Her mother was quieter, more tired. The sparkle that once filled their small apartment seemed dimmer. At night, Angela would sit at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills, wondering how long she could endure Whitmore's silent war. Then, one morning, an email arrived that shattered everything. Due to internal restructuring, your position is being dissolved effective immediately. Thank you for your service. Angela sat frozen, reading the words again and again. No warning, no meeting, just gone. By noon, her company access card stopped working. Security escorted her from the building while a few sympathetic co-workers watched helplessly. Whitmore didn't even have the decency to speak to her himself. Maya was waiting at home when Angela arrived, her small face lighting up until she saw the expression her mother carried. Angela tried to smile, tried to make it sound like it was fine. But Maya wasn't a child you could easily fool. That evening, as Angela sat alone in silence, a message buzzed on her phone. It was from a member of the Chinese delegation, a woman named Lin Zhao. We were deeply impressed by your daughter. Our company is hosting a cultural exchange event in Beijing next month. We'd love for Maya and you to attend as our guests. All expenses covered. Angela stared at the message, unsure if it was a blessing or another setup. But something inside her whispered that this was more than coincidence. When Whitmore learned about the invitation, he was livid, though he pretended not to care. The news of Maya's recognition abroad threatened the very image he built, the image of a man who championed diversity, yet fired the very woman whose daughter had impressed international partners. Behind closed doors, he began to plot. He instructed his PR team to spin the narrative that he had discovered Maya, that her talent had blossomed under his company's mentorship. He issued a statement praising her, painting himself as a visionary leader who supported her unique abilities. The hypocrisy made Angela sick. When she refused to endorse his version of the story, the smear campaign began. Anonymous comments online claimed she had exploited her daughter for fame. Rumors spread that she had leaked the gala video herself. Whitmore's influence reached far, enough to make her name toxic in corporate circles. Job interviews dried up, doors closed. Still, Angela refused to bend. If the world wouldn't believe her, she would let truth speak for itself. And that truth was about to explode on a scale even Whitmore couldn't control. Because while he tried to bury her reputation, the Chinese delegation had other plans. They had invited journalists, educators, and sponsors to the Beijing event, and made sure Maya's story, the real story, would be told to the world. Angela didn't know it yet, but this invitation was more than an opportunity. It was justice slowly making its way back to her doorstep, and it would strike harder than Whitmore ever imagined. The flight to Beijing felt surreal. Angela stared out the window as the city lights of Los Angeles disappeared beneath the clouds, her heart a knot of fear and hope. Maya sat beside her, earphones in, whispering quietly in Mandarin as she practiced phrases she hoped to use at the event. Every word carried the sound of determination, the same determination Angela once had before the world beat it out of her. The invitation from Lin Zhao had come with a full itinerary, a week of cultural and corporate exchange events, workshops, and a keynote segment where Maya would interpret live for global delegates. Angela hadn't wanted to accept it first, but something deep in her spirit told her she had to. This wasn't just about opportunity anymore. It was about reclaiming dignity that had been stolen. By the time they landed, a small team from the host company greeted them with banners and smiles. News crews were already there. The story of the young American girl who surprised everyone with her Mandarin fluency had become international news. Overnight, Maya had become a symbol, not just of brilliance, but of unity, of breaking barriers. Still, Angela kept her guard up. The past had taught her that fame and fairness rarely walked hand in hand. 3 days into the trip, at a grand event hall filled with executives, government officials, and media representatives, Maya took the stage. Cameras flashed, lights burned, and yet she looked calm, her small figure radiating quiet confidence. When the Chinese CEO delivered his speech, Maya translated it with perfect rhythm and grace, her words echoing across the hall with a purity that transcended race, culture, and age. Applause thundered. The CEO smiled warmly at her, saying in Mandarin, "You are proof that language is a bridge between hearts." The audience stood, clapping. Angela's eyes filled with tears. And then, in an almost cinematic twist, the doors at the back of the hall opened. Charles Whitmore walked in. Angela froze. He was supposed to be in the U.S. But there he was, immaculate in his suit, smile sharp as a knife. Cameras turned instantly, capturing his unexpected arrival. He strode forward confidently, pretending to be part of the celebration. "Ah, there's my star," he boomed, walking toward Maya as if he owned her success. He shook hands with the CEO, posing for photos, and said, "I knew this girl was destined for greatness the moment I met her. I'm so proud to have supported her journey." Angela's stomach turned. Every word out of his mouth was a lie. Reporters scribbled notes. Photographers snapped pictures. He was stealing her daughter's story right in front of the world. But fate had been quietly preparing something for this moment. After the speeches, Lin Zhao approached the podium. She smiled graciously at the audience, then at Whitmore. "Mr. Whitmore," she began in flawless English, "we are honored that you could attend. In fact, your company's actions inspired an important discussion in our organization." Whitmore straightened, ready to bask in praise. But the next words froze his smile. She continued, "When we learned that Mrs. Angela Reed, one of your long-term employees, had been terminated shortly after the gala, despite her daughter's exceptional contribution to your success, we were deeply troubled. So we conducted a review." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lin Zhao turned to the large screen behind her. It lit up with news clippings, internal memos, and emails, proof of Angela's termination and the timing of Whitmore's smear campaign. Then came a recording, one the Chinese team had obtained through media leaks. It was Whitmore's voice, caught during a private meeting. She got lucky. Nobody wants to see a little black girl upstage a boardroom full of investors. We'll spin it. Make it ours. The room went dead silent. Cameras turned toward Whitmore, capturing his paling face. He tried to speak, to deny it, but Lin Zhao wasn't done. "Mrs. Reed," she said, looking toward Angela, "on behalf of our organization, we'd like to offer you a permanent international position overseeing multicultural operations, with full relocation benefits, housing, and education sponsorship for Maya." Applause erupted like a wave. Maya turned to her mother, her eyes wide with disbelief and joy. Angela felt her knees weaken, tears breaking free after months of silent endurance. Whitmore tried to step forward, mumbling excuses about context and miscommunication, but no one was listening anymore. Security and event staff quietly ushered him away from the stage as journalists swarmed for comments. His face was red, his career unraveling in real time before a global audience. The same cameras that once captured his mockery were now documenting his downfall. Angela stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed, as Maya wrapped her arms around her waist. The little girl looked up at her and said softly, "Mama, we did it." Angela smiled through tears. "No, baby," she whispered. "You did it." That night, as the city lights of Beijing shimmered below their hotel balcony, the weight of everything settled in. Years of quiet endurance, humiliation, and struggle had finally led to this. Not revenge, but recognition. The very world that had mocked them was now celebrating them. And somewhere across the ocean, Charles Whitmore watched his empire crumble under the weight of his arrogance, destroyed not by anger, but by truth spoken fluently in a language he never cared to understand. The morning after the event in Beijing dawned bright. The sky stretched in soft hues of gold and rose. For the first time in months, Angela Reed woke without the familiar heaviness pressing on her chest. The hotel room was quiet except for the gentle hum of the city below and the faint sound of Maya practicing Mandarin by the window, her voice soft, pure, and full of promise. The world had changed overnight. What had begun as a moment of humiliation in a ballroom across the ocean had transformed into a story that echoed across continents. News outlets replayed the confrontation between Lin Zhao and Charles Whitmore in endless loops. Commentators praised Maya's brilliance, but even more, they admired Angela's dignity, her composure in the face of public cruelty and private loss. Messages flooded her inbox, strangers thanking her for standing tall, parents of children of color saying they finally felt seen. Universities reached out offering scholarships for Maya, and journalists requested interviews. But more than fame or validation, what touched Angela most were the quiet letters from janitors, teachers, mothers, and immigrants, each sharing how her story reminded them that worth isn't granted by power, it's proven by perseverance. Meanwhile, back in the States, Whitmore Industries was imploding. The leaked recording had gone viral, drawing outrage from shareholders, civil rights groups, and global partners. Within days, Whitmore was forced to resign. His face appeared across every financial news channel. The once untouchable CEO brought down not by a rival corporation, but by his own prejudice. His empire crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. But Angela wasn't thinking about revenge. She wasn't even thinking about justice. She was thinking about her daughter, the little girl who had stood unshaken in a room full of power and turned shame into strength. The following week, Angela and Maya moved into their new apartment in Beijing, a modest but beautiful space provided by Lin Zhao's company. For the first time, Angela felt a sense of belonging. Her new role as director of multicultural operations wasn't just a job, it was a platform. She worked to create programs for underrepresented voices, ensuring that no one with talent would ever be silenced because of who they were or where they came from. Maya, meanwhile, continued to thrive. She was enrolled in one of Beijing's top international schools, where her linguistic gifts were nurtured instead of doubted. She learned not only Mandarin, but Japanese and French too. Teachers often said her empathy made her exceptional, that when she translated, she didn't just convert words. She carried emotions across worlds. On weekends, mother and daughter explored the city together, walking through markets, visiting temples, sharing laughter over street food. Each moment felt like reclaiming a piece of the life they had lost. But even amid their happiness, Angela sometimes thought back to that night in the ballroom. The laughter, the humiliation, the disbelief that turned into awe. It wasn't a memory of pain anymore. It was a lesson written in fire and courage, that no one's value should ever be determined by their skin, their accent, or their station. Months later, Lin Zhao invited Angela to speak at an international leadership summit. The theme, Breaking Barriers, Women Who Redefine Power. Angela hesitated. She had never been one for the spotlight, but she also knew that silence had protected injustice for too long. So she stood on that stage, lights blinding, thousands watching, and told her story. She spoke not with anger, but with grace, about the struggle of being seen, about the quiet racism hidden beneath professionalism, about how her daughter's courage had reminded her that dignity isn't something others can give or take away. It's something you carry inside you. Her final words left the hall in silence. There was a man who once told me my daughter's voice didn't belong in his world. But that same voice now speaks across languages, connecting hearts he could never reach. The lesson is simple. Never mistake cruelty for strength, and never mistake silence for weakness. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, but Angela barely noticed. Her eyes were on Maya, sitting in the front row, smiling with quiet pride. Later that night, as they walked along the riverbank, lanterns floating on the water, Maya asked softly, "Mama, do you think Mr. Whitmore saw your speech?" Angela looked out at the glowing city and smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said, "but it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we did." Maya nodded, leaning her head against her mother's arm. "You know," she said with a mischievous grin, "if he had actually given you his job, you probably wouldn't have liked it anyway." Angela laughed, a deep, freeing laugh she hadn't felt in years. "You're probably right," she said, "but I think we found something better." As the night deepened, lanterns rose into the air, carrying wishes and prayers. Angela whispered one for her daughter, not for fame, but for peace. for a world where no child would have to prove their worth simply because of their color. And somewhere across the ocean, in a quiet office stripped of his nameplate, Charles Whitmore sat alone, watching the news replay her speech. The woman he had tried to break now standing taller than ever. He finally understood too late that real power isn't measured in wealth or titles or control. It's measured in resilience, in the unshakable courage of those who refuse to bow. Because sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room doesn't belong to the loudest man, but to the little black girl who spoke Chinese.